I am Bilal Marwat, and I am here to discuss the important play of Shakespeare, Hamlet. We usually think of this masterpiece just as a classic tragedy, right? But as we're going to explore today, it's actually, at its core, a psychological thriller. We're going to break down the brilliant, completely riddling mind of a prince who's literally both the detective and the victim in his own story. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at the royal Danish court, then a ghostly call for revenge. After that, the mousetrap and the madness, followed by a bloody climax, the anatomy of a tragedy, and finally, we'll go deep inside the mind of Hamlet himself. Section 1, the Royal Danish Court, Suspects and Victims. Let's set the stage. Written right around 1600 to 1602, Hamlet is really Shakespeare's first major tragedy. It leans heavily on the Senecan revenge tradition, think dark secrets, brutal betrayal, and, of course, a massive demand for bloody vengeance. To truly get a grip on the dangerous tangled web at play here, we've got to look at our key players. We've got Hamlet, our hero, the grieving Prince of Denmark. Then there's Claudius, his uncle, who is now the king. Next to him is Gertrude, the queen, Hamlet's mother, who, super controversially, is now married to Claudius. Over on the other side, we have the counselor of state, Polonius, his daughter Ophelia, who's our heroine, and his son Laertes. And rounding it all out is Horatio, Hamlet's one true ride-or-die friend. Seriously, this isn't just a royal court. It is a literal powder keg of dangerous, intertwined relationships. Now, Shakespeare didn't just pull this powder keg out of thin air. The story actually has some really deep historical roots. It draws from older plot sources like Historica Danica by Saxo Grammaticus, which got translated into French, and there was even an earlier German play that folks often call the Hamlet. But here's the thing. Shakespeare took these basic, existing frameworks of fratricide and revenge, and he elevated them into something entirely unprecedented. Section 2. A ghostly call for revenge, the inciting incident. Every good thriller needs a spark, right? Well, in this one, it comes from beyond the grave. Think about this timeline. The past is completely defined by a sudden tragedy. King Hamlet of Denmark has died. Then, the clock strikes midnight, and our inciting incident arrives. A ghost, looking exactly like the dead king, materializes out of nowhere, which, heavily foreshadows that things are about to go very wrong. By dawn, the ghost drops a massive bombshell on Prince Hamlet. The king was actually murdered by his own brother, Claudius, and the ghost makes one single, terrifying demand: find the truth and get revenge. This revelation absolutely crushes Hamlet. I mean, he's already deeply upset about his mother Gertrude marrying Claudius so quickly. So, what's his move? He resolves to find the truth, but his method is basically pure psychological warfare. He puts on what the text calls an anti-disposition, meaning he starts acting like he's completely lost his mind. It's a total act. But this deliberate chaos immediately puts Claudius on high alert. The king actually sends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to spy on the prince. So the ultimate game of cat and mouse has officially begun. Which brings us to Section 3, the mousetrap and the madness, catching a king. So, you might be wondering, how exactly does a prince prove a king is a murderer when there's literally no physical evidence? Well, he uses art. Hamlet sets up this brilliant play within a play called The Murder of Gonzaga, which he very playfully dubs the mousetrap. He actually writes a few extra lines into the actor's script so that the performance perfectly mimics a villain murdering his brother and stealing his wife. It is a high-stakes, incredibly clever psychological trap designed for one purpose: to force Claudius into a visual confession. And guess what? The trap works perfectly. Until it doesn't. First off, Claudius totally freaks out during the play, which definitively proves his guilt to Hamlet. Boom, confirmed. Suddenly, Hamlet gets this golden opportunity to take his revenge because he finds Claudius all alone. But he stops. Why? Because Claudius is praying. Hamlet totally overthinks the spiritual consequences and postpones it. But this one single moment of hesitation triggers a disastrous chain reaction. Because right after that, acting on pure, sudden impulse, Hamlet strikes blindly at a spy hiding behind a curtain in his mother's room. Except, it's not the king. He unknowingly kills Polonius. Now, what's really interesting about this next piece of data is how it reveals the true focus of the story. If we just count the soliloquies, those moments where a character speaks their innermost thoughts out loud to the audience, the numbers are telling. Hamlet completely dominates with 7. King Claudius has 3, and Ophelia has 1. Shakespeare is using this specific breakdown to show us that the real action here isn't physical at all. It's heavily internal. We are basically trapped inside Hamlet's head, forced to listen to him constantly, endlessly debate his own hesitation. Section 4. A bloody climax. The fencing match. That hesitation we just talked about, it comes at a catastrophic cost. The death of Polonius kicks off an unstoppable, fatal avalanche. Driven completely to desperation by her father's death and Hamlet's erratic behavior, Ophelia tragically drowns in a brook. Then her brother Laertes comes back, absolutely burning for revenge. Claudius, being the manipulator he is, uses this grief and sets up a friendly fencing match between Hamlet and Laertes. But it's totally rigged. Laertes is using a poisoned rapier. And just in case that fails, Claudius prepares a backup cup of poisoned wine. But the whole thing backfires spectacularly. Gertrude unknowingly drinks the poisoned wine. During a scuffle, the swords get swapped, and both Hamlet and Laertes are fatally struck by the poison. Finally, in his absolute last moments, a dying Hamlet manages to stab Claudius. 8. That is the staggering body count by the end of this play. The king, the queen, Polonius, Ophelia, Laertes, Rosencrantz, Guildenstern, and Hamlet himself. 8 deaths. The sheer scale of the tragedy is unbelievable. Almost the entire royal court is wiped off the map. Moving on to Section 5, Anatomy of a Tragedy, Why It Matters. So why does this specific sequence of destruction actually matter? Why is it considered a structurally perfect Shakespearean masterpiece? Well, Hamlet hits every single core feature of a quintessential tragedy. You've got a hero of high rank, dealing with intense melodramatic elements, plus a massive overarching sense of fate and conflict. But the structural genius really shines in the evolution of Hamlet's character and the strict moral order of this universe. Ultimately, the hero is responsible for his own misfortune. On top of that, Shakespeare masterfully heightens the emotional gut punch by placing perfectly timed, light, comic moments right up against the absolute darkest, most tragic scenes. But if we're really looking at what defines this tragedy, it's Hamlet's fatal flaw, his irresolution and his endless procrastination. Think about it. There are actually no external physical barriers preventing Hamlet from killing Claudius. None. The delay is entirely 100% self-imposed. Which brings us to our final section, Section 6. Inside the mind of Hamlet, the true battlefield. So why on earth does he delay? There's a deep, deep duality that completely paralyzes our hero. On the one hand, we're looking at an intellectual genius, a guy armed with incredible wit and really sharp, dark humor. But on the other hand, we see this deeply melancholic mind that is incredibly prone to nervous instability. The real conflict of this explainer isn't just Hamlet versus Claudius, it's Hamlet's own brilliant intellect at war with his crushing melancholy. And sitting right smack in the middle of that internal war zone is his conscience. Hamlet's conscience is his ultimate barrier. He feels this deep, philosophical, moral repulsion to the actual physical act of murder, even when it's explicitly demanded by the ghost of his own father. Fundamentally, Hamlet is living in a world of mysteriousness and endless riddles. He's described as a man of excessive reflection and speculation. It's like he lives entirely in a state of meditation. And, when you spend that much time living completely inside your own head, taking actual, concrete, physical action in the real world becomes almost impossible. Which brings us to the most profound question at the core of all this. The source material notes that Hamlet's gifts become his enemies, his brilliant intellect, his profound moral conscience, his immense capacity for deep reflection. These are the exact things that cause his hesitation, which ultimately leads to the destruction of everyone he loves, including himself. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to consider. In the pursuit of truth and justice, do our own greatest mental gifts sometimes become our deadliest enemies? Thanks for exploring the mind of Hamlet with me today.